Okay, so let's unpack this. Even in a seemingly niche corner of the economy like software development, things are shifting. I mean, at warp speed, thanks to AI.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Think about it, the very tools we use to build the digital world are now being, well, fundamentally reshaped by the digital world itself.
Exactly.
This isn't just a minor tweak. It really feels like a before and after moment, you know?
It really does. And what's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the change, like you said. It's not just a slight bump in coding efficiency. It feels more like a fundamental rethinking of how software gets created.
Yeah, a real potential acceleration, maybe unlike anything we've seen before in this field.
Could be. We're
Good.
definitely seeing signs of that.
Exactly. And to really get our heads around this, we've been digging deep into a new report from Anthropic, their economic index. This one's specifically focused on AI's impact on software development.
Right, the Anthropic report.
And they analyzed 500,000 coding-related interactions across Claude.ai and their dedicated coding agent Claude Code, 500,000.
That is a lot of data.
It's a massive amount of real-world usage data.
It is, and that volume is really key, I think. It gives us a much clearer picture than just, theoretical chats. We're seeing how developers are actually using these tools, like in the trenches.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We want to extract the core patterns Anthropic uncovered and really try to understand what they tell us about the future of coding.
Makes sense.
The report highlighted 3 main trends that really jumped out, and we're going to break each one down. First, there's this big difference in how their specialized coding agent, Claude Code, is being used. Much more for automation, the AI directly doing the coding compared to just general assistance.
Okay, that's interesting.
Second, the surprisingly significant role AI seems to be playing already in building user-facing applications, the stuff we actually see and click on online.
Right, the front end stuff.
And finally, this kind of early lead that startups seem to have in adopting these advanced AI coding tools, especially compared to the bigger, more established companies.
Okay, yeah. That fits some historical patterns, maybe.
Definitely something to explore. Ready to dive into what it all means.
Absolutely. Let's start with that first pattern then. The striking difference in how Claude.ai and Claude Code are being used when it comes to automation.
Okay, so for you listening, when we talk about automation here, we mean the AI directly taking on and completing coding tasks. Like, the AI is the primary coder for that specific job.
Right. As opposed to augmentation, where it's more like the AI is working alongside a human coder, kind of enhancing their abilities, like a super smart co-pilot.
That distinction is really critical, and the report, it reveals a pretty significant difference between the two Claude platforms.
Yeah, a remarkable 79% of conversations on Claude Code were classified as automation. I mean, think about that for a second.
79%?
Nearly 8 out of 10 times developers are using this specific tool. They're having the AI do the coding, not just sort of help out with it. That feels like a massive shift.
It really does, especially when you compare it to the more general Claude.ai. There, only 49% of conversations fell into that automation category.
Wow.
That's a huge difference, almost a 30 percentage point gap. It really highlights that when you have a tool specifically designed for coding, the tendency is, well, to hand over more of the direct work to the AI.
It's like using a specialized tool for a specific job, right?
Yeah.
It's just more efficient for that purpose. Makes sense.
Precisely. And as the report suggests, this could be a strong indicator of, future trends.
Right. As we see more of these specialized agentic AI products, and these aren't just tools that respond to single prompts, they can take on a broader goal, break it down, almost like a digital project manager for code.
Ah, okay. A bit more autonomous.
Exactly. That's the key difference. And as these become more common, we should probably anticipate a wider move towards increased automation, not just in coding, but across various types of knowledge work. Software development just seems to be maybe on the leading edge here.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. The report goes even deeper. It breaks down automation and augmentation into different subtypes.
Okay.
For automation, they identified feedback loop, where the AI completes a task, but with human validation, like a coder pasting error messages back to the AI for it to fix.
Human in the loop still.
Exactly. And then there's directive, where the AI pretty much takes the reins with minimal input beyond the initial instruction. Sort of, here's the goal, go do it.
Got it. And the data for these subtypes really tells a story, doesn't it?
It does. Feedback loop was nearly twice as common on Claude Code, almost 36% of interactions compared to just over 21% on Claude.ai.
Okay, big jump.
And directive automation, also significantly higher on Claude Code, almost 44% versus about 27.5% on the general Claude.ai.
So users of this specialized coding AI aren't just automating more overall.
Right. They're also much more likely to either say, here's what I need, go figure it out, that's the directive part, or here's a problem, you solve it, using that feedback loop process.
Which means, conversely,
Exactly. The augmentation subtypes things like learning, where the user asks the AI to explain stuff, or task iteration, which is more collaborative back and forth, and validation, where the AI helps check existing work. Those were all noticeably less frequent on Claude Code. It really paints a picture of a tool being used to, well, get the coding done directly. Less for learning or traditional collaboration, maybe?
It does seem that way.
Right.
However, it's important to remember, right, even with this higher level of automation, human involvement in those feedback loop interactions is still quite significant.
That's a good point.
The report specifically points out users pasting error messages. This suggests that while the AI is driving the task completion, human expertise in, identifying the problem and communicating it effectively remains crucial, at least for now.
Which then raises a really interesting question for you listening. Will that human involvement in the feedback loop stay so central? As these AI agents get even more sophisticated, will they eventually be able to identify and resolve those underlying issues themselves? Could that further reduce the need for even this level of human intervention?
it's definitely a key area to watch as this tech evolves. You wonder where that line settles.
Absolutely. And that leads us nicely into the second key pattern the report highlighted, the surprisingly prominent role of AI in building user-facing applications, the stuff we actually see and interact with.
Right. This one was maybe a bit unexpected, at least in terms of the degree.
I think so. We often think of AI in coding tackling, like the complex back-end stuff, right? The intricate algorithms behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a heavy lifting, maybe.
But the data clearly shows that coders are heavily using AI to build the front end, the user interfaces, the interactive elements that make up our daily digital experiences.
And the breakdown of programming languages used is particularly revealing here, isn't it?
Totally. JavaScript and TypeScript, which are, fundamental languages for web development together, accounted for a massive 31% of all coding queries across both platforms.
31%. Just those two.
And then if you add in HTML and CSS, the languages for structuring and styling web pages, that number jumps to a combined 59%.
Wow. Okay. That's nearly 2/3 of all coding interactions involving these front-end technologies.
It's huge. It really emphasizes just how much AI is currently being applied right there in the front-end development space.
And while back-end languages like Python were there, what was it, 14%?
Yeah, 14%. And data-focused languages like SQL at 6%, they were represented, but their combined share is significantly smaller than those core web dev languages.
Well, though it's worth noting, as the report does, Python's kind of dual role, right? Back-end and data analysis. That probably boosts its usage.
Good point. Very versatile.
Exactly. And these language trends, they directly align with the types of coding tasks that were most common. UI, UX component development, and web and mobile app development were right near the top.
Makes sense. It indicates a clear demand for AI assistance in creating the visual and interactive parts of apps.
Which brings up this fascinating concept of vibe coding that the report mentions.
Ah, yes, vibe coding. I love that term.
Me too. The idea that developers, maybe regardless of their specific coding expertise, can just describe their desired outcome in, natural language.
Yeah, just everyday words.
And let the AI handle a big chunk of the technical implementation details. It's almost like the AI is acting as a translator, isn't it? Converting a feeling or a vision directly into functional code.
That's a very apt description. Like you could tell the AI, I want a button that gently fades in when someone hovers over it and changes color to a soft blue.
Right. And with vibe coding, the AI can likely generate the necessary code, maybe the CSS, the JavaScript, even if you don't know the precise syntax yourself.
Yeah.
Just based on that natural language request.
And the potential implications of this are pretty significant, aren't they?
I think so. If AI gets increasingly skilled at handling the creation of these more, let's say, straightforward applications and UI elements through this kind of vibe coding, well, then roles that are heavily focused on those specific tasks might see more rapid changes.
So what could happen to those developers then? Does the report suggest anything?
It suggests a potential shift, maybe towards higher level design and user experience work.
Ah, okay. So instead of focusing on writing the basic code for common components.
Right. They might increasingly focus on the overall strategic vision, the user journey, the more complex interactions, essentially sort of orchestrating the AI's output.
An evolution of the role, driven directly by these AI capabilities.
It points towards a future where the human role becomes maybe less about the direct line-by-line execution of code for standard elements and more about strategic design and the intelligent direction of these AI-powered development processes.
Okay, interesting. Let's move on then to the third key pattern highlighted in the report. Who is actually using Claude for coding tasks? And this is where we see a really interesting divergence emerge between startups and the larger, more established enterprises.
Yeah, the initial analysis in the report indicates that startups are really the early adopters here, especially with Claude Code, that
Right.
specialized coding agent.
Okay.
They accounted for approximately 33% of conversations on that platform that were related to startup work.
A third. Okay.
Yeah. But in contrast, enterprise-related applications only constituted about 13% of Claude Code usage.
13 versus 33. That's a notable difference.
It really is. It suggests maybe a greater willingness or perhaps a greater need for startups to embrace these new tools quickly.
That's a pretty significant gap, especially when you compare it to the usage patterns on the more general Claude.ai, right?
Exactly. On Claude.ai, while startups still showed higher usage for startup-related work, the difference compared to enterprise use was considerably smaller.
So it really underscores that startups seem to be adopting these dedicated AI coding tools at a much faster rate than their larger counterparts.
It does seem that way. And the report also emphasizes the substantial usage by individuals too, right? Students, academics, people working on personal projects, folks using it for learning.
Right, the non-commercial users.
Yeah, this collective group actually accounts for half of all interactions across both Claude platforms.
Wow, 50%.
So it's not just businesses exploring AI-assisted coding. There's significant individual interest and, experimentation happening as well.
And the report draws this compelling parallel to how new tech has historically been adopted. Startups often leverage cutting-edge tools to get a competitive advantage.
While larger organizations tend to be more cautious, they often have more complex approval processes, stricter security protocols, things that can slow down adoption.
Makes sense. More hurdles to jump through.
And the potentially transformative nature of AI in improving coding productivity could really amplify this historical pattern, couldn't it?
How so?
Well, if these AI coding agents genuinely deliver significant gains in efficiency and speed, which is the promise, right, then those early adopting startups could potentially build a substantial competitive edge. Faster development cycles, maybe lower costs.
Over enterprises that are slower to integrate these tools into their workflows.
Exactly. It often comes down to agility and that willingness to experiment, which startups usually have more of.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, a smaller, more nimble team that can achieve the output of a much larger team thanks to AI assistance, that's going to give them a real advantage. Speed, innovation, efficiency.
Precisely. Now, just to provide a complete picture here, it's really crucial that we acknowledge the limitations of this analysis. And the Anthropic report itself does this very thoroughly, very transparently.
Absolutely. That's important context for you listening. So first off, this data comes exclusively from interactions with Claude.ai and Claude Code.
Right. It doesn't include how their team or enterprise products or their API are being used.
And those could potentially reveal different usage patterns, couldn't they? Especially within more structured professional settings.
Definitely. Also, as these AI tools become more advanced and agentic, like we discussed, that line between what counts as full automation and what's still augmentation gets increasingly blurry.
Yeah, that feedback loop pattern is a good example.
Exactly. It's categorized as automation in the report, but it still heavily relies on active user input and oversight. Our current ways of categorizing these interactions might actually need to evolve.
Good point. The report also mentions their classification of users, right? Like figuring out if someone was working on a startup project versus an enterprise one.
Yeah, that relied on inferences drawn from limited contextual information. So some of those classifications might not be perfectly precise.
Okay. And of course, it's crucial to remember this initial data set likely represents early adopters.
Yes, people and companies who are already maybe more technically inclined, more open to experimenting.
So these early patterns might not necessarily reflect how the broader population of software developers will ultimately use these tools down the line.
That's a really key point to keep in mind. We need more data over a longer period to see if these initial trends hold true across the wider community and in different types of organizations.
And there were other limitations worth noting, too.
A few, yeah. The analysis was limited to a specific time frame, mainly for privacy reasons. So we might be missing seasonal or cyclical trends in development workflows.
Right, like end of quarter pushes or something.
Potentially. Also, we're only seeing Claude usage here. It's highly likely many developers are using multiple AI coding assistants, Copilot, Gemini Code Assist, others.
Good point. So this report offers just one window into their overall AI engagement.
Exactly. And finally, the report focused solely on what tasks developers were delegating to AI. It didn't assess the quality of the code produced.
Or how it was used, or if it actually made them more productive.
Right. Those are all critical questions for future investigation. How good is the output, and does it actually help in the end?
Okay. So despite those acknowledged limitations, which are important, the report still provides a really compelling snapshot, doesn't it, of a rapidly evolving landscape.
Absolutely.
The core takeaway seems to be that AI is fundamentally reshaping how developers work, particularly with these more specialized autonomous systems like Claude Code.
And especially, it seems, in the development of user-facing applications.
Right. And it also appears that startups are currently leading the charge in adopting these cutting-edge tools.
Which brings us to that looking ahead section of the report. It poses some really important questions, I think, for you, our listener, to consider. Based on these initial findings, what might the future hold?
Like, will those feedback loops where human input is still significant continue to be dominant? Or are we heading towards more complete automation, where the AI increasingly handles the whole coding process with minimal human intervention?
And as AI gets capable of building bigger, more complex software, will the main role of the human developer shift? Maybe towards managing and guiding these AI systems, rather than directly writing the code themselves.
It's a fundamental rethinking of the whole creation process, really.
It is. The report also prompts us to think about which specific roles within software development might see the most dramatic changes, or even which roles might potentially face, displacement as AI capabilities keep advancing.
That's a crucial consideration for anyone in or thinking about entering the tech industry.
Definitely. And perhaps one of the most intriguing possibilities raised is, could the increasing use of AI in coding actually accelerate the development of AI itself?
Ah, the positive feedback loop idea.
Exactly, where AI helps build even better AI faster. That kind of self-reinforcing cycle could have really profound, far-reaching implications across so many sectors.
Wow.
And while AI tech is still relatively new in the broader economy, its application in software development is one of the most mature areas we're seeing right now. It's developing very actively.
So software development could be seen as a kind of leading indicator.
It's a potentially valuable one, yes. A domain to monitor closely for clues about how AI might impact other industries and jobs in the future.
So as you've listened to our deep dive into this Anthropic report today, really think about your own field or areas you're interested in. How might the patterns we're starting to see in AI's impact on software development, the automation, the shift in tasks, the adoption patterns, how might those offer some valuable clues or insights into the potential future of your work in a world increasingly shaped by AI?
It's definitely a question worth some serious thought.